The brazenness, Mr. Speaker. Imagine that. You exceed the limit to $85.4 million, and you have the decency at least to bring it under the limit by the year end when you know that it will be recorded. In 2010, that was not an isolated practice. The overdraft was $77.8 million at the end of the year. 2011, they went under, but still it wasn't repaid. It was $29.1 million. 2012, $45.1 million. 2013, $52.5 million. 2014, $52.7. 2015, $61.9. 2016, $57.5. 2017, at the end of December, it was $57.4. And then in 2018, for some strange reason, they had it at the end of September 30th. By that time, it was $47.7 million. So, end of year overdraft for 2019 was $31.6 million at an interest rate of 8% of the Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So let's understand this, Mr. Speaker. The annual budget is a framework through which the various aspects of the financial management and control of the government are performed. And the underlying principle in allowing the overdraft is to manage the flows, the inflows of money, which we talked about in the estimates above. And you see where I'm going, why I established and set out how the money comes in and how much there is. So it allows for the financial management and controls are performed, aspects of the financial management. The underlying principle is to manage those two flows, Mr. Speaker: income, recurrent revenues, and the spending within the approved budget for the given financial year. And this would be set out in the Appropriation Act and governed by the Financial Administration Act. So these, Mr. Speaker, if you like, these are the guardrails that really keep the Minister of Finance or the government from careening off the side and doing whatever the hell it likes. They are prevented, they're supposed to prevent the administration for the time being running the country. Those words are important. For the time being running the country. It's not a plantation that you own. For the time being running the country from running amok with respect to the country's finances. It is clear that when one looks at the performance of this government, as set out above, the overdraft provision has been unlawfully used as an additional way to finance its operation beyond what was legally provided. So the guardrails have been breached. The government, essentially, they run off the road of responsible financial management, and they have the country heading to a financial cliff. Mr. Speaker, in 2018, by September 2017, you know what the overdraft facility was? They had already spent $72.8 million, even though this parliament which you sit in, you might not have been there at the time, but you were at the time. You know, that they had spent $72.4 million. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money, Mr. Speaker. So they have they've exceeded the limit. The overdraft limit has been raised from time to time by the government. I might say $50 million is too high now. It used to be, I think, $35 million one time. It might have been lower. None might have been. It would have been lower at some point. But the government, they obviously don't think that it's high enough. because every year they exceed it. Routinely, Mr. Speaker. I mean, routinely breaking the law. Fluctuating. It didn't say fluctuating above 50. That's the point. You set your limit here. You have a box that you're in, stay in the box. Stay in your lane, that's right. Keep the guardrails around you. And that's how they've been getting away with meeting some of these expenses. And they tell you that, oh, we're doing it for poor people. You know what the interest rate is on the overdraft? 8%, yes. Government should be borrowing at 8%? All right. Well, then don't exceed it. That's why Parliament says to you, listen, guys, this thing is expensive. We know that you expect to get so much money coming in at the beginning of the year. You know that you're going to spend so much money as you're going through. We don't want you to run out of money to finance your programs. All right? So when you have something to spend, you can go and use the overdraft, but only up to about $50 million. Not about, exactly $50 million. All right. But that's not what me say. Is what the law say? No, that's what the law say. You ain't read it yet? It says, well, how come? How? Well, if you want to change the law. Yeah? Anyway. So here, Mr. Speaker. Here is it, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Finance, over the course of the time, they realized that they had to do something about the situation because this overdraft just keep ballooning every year. Or it's more likely, Mr. Speaker, that the bank, because it's always the bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, would have put some pressure on them and say, come on, guys, you got to do something about this overdraft. Year end is coming up, and you still have $60 million, $70 million in overdraft money. There, master stroke. Fiscal responsibility. Do something about it to bring the overdraft facility back into legal compliance. And at least to make the bank look like they're doing the job, the manager. Right. So, beginning in 2011, Mr. Speaker, it seems to me that they started doing something again, Mr. Speaker, that is also illegal. Instead of reducing the overdraft, they converted the part in excess into a loan called the Accountant General Overdraft Loan. So you can't bring it down, so you say, the bank says, this looks bad. Chop off $40 million, make it a loan, we could pay interest, the same interest rate, 8%, and your books look a little tidier. The problem with that, Mr. Speaker, is that they have no authorization to borrow, to take out a loan of that nature during the year. Because as we said, when I quoted the act, every borrowing, you have to come to Parliament to get that authorization. You have to come to Parliament to get that authorization. You can't just simply say, as a matter of convenience, we could borrow $40 million and put that in the following year's estimates, and Parliament doesn't know about it until we read the estimates. There's no debate on it. Who gives you that authority? Is it just a matter of convenience? That is how you don't read the estimates? I mean, that is so facetious, Mr. Speaker. I know, that is how come I'm doing the present now. I'm not debating it because you brought it up. I brought it up. No, I'm not confusing my head. I'm very clear what I'm saying here. Yes, but was it passed? Mr. Speaker. All right, we know. You know how we know, Mr. Speaker? Ena. Mr. Speaker, I don't know if I could find the page. Yeah, Mr. Speaker, listen, I don't have it with me. I thought I had it, but I left it in the estimates. But here's the thing. in the footnotes for the 2018 estimates, you know. That is where they explain what they did in 2017. Because you know what the overdraft would have been in 2017 if they hadn't done that? They cut off $40 million and made an overdraft loan, a second overdraft loan. It would have been $97 million. So in the footnotes, check the estimates for 2018 and you will see down at the bottom.
There are estimates in this parliament.
Of the debts, yes.
So you can get a copy.
And it'll be good. And you will see where it explains that that's what was done. Again, as I say, Mr. Speaker, it's not a matter of the bank working out something with the government. The government had to work out something with Parliament. You got to come here for the authorization to do it. You can't just simply convert it into a loan and say, that is how we run things. So no resolution, this is in 2018, 2017, $40 million of overdraft loan was converted, of the overdraft was converted into a loan. No resolution under Section 44 of the Finance Administration Act was done. So the loan was essentially illegal. And I hope the bank managers are listening to this as well. As it turned out, in 2017, the outturn was that the overdraft at the end of the year was still $57.4 million, you know, after $40 million was taken off and converted into a loan. So it would have been over 97. And it was done in the dark, as I said. And if you look at page 670 of the 2018 estimates, you will see where it is explained there. Imagine that, a mere footnote.
670?
670. And it's not like they say, okay, we come back to Parliament the following year and they explain it. So, Mr. Speaker, we outline what the overdraft was from 2011 all the way up to 2019. 2019, it was $32.6 million. But this practice of converting the overdraft, part of it, into a loan, as I say, the first record we have of this is in the 2012 estimate. So at the end of September 2011, we had an accountant overdraft loan of $49.1 million. In 2012, it was $45.6 million. 2013, $42.0 million. 2014, this is September 2014, was $37.6 million. And by the time you get to 2019, and this is every year, it was $36.7 million. In fact, by that time, Mr. Speaker, we had 2018, we had more than one. We had three accountant overdraft loans. One for $17.4 million in 2018, one for $39.2 million, and the other for $13.7 million.
How much?
$13.7 million. That's in 2018. In 2019, it had gone to $36.7 million. Three loans. $9.6 million and $12.2 million. So that is where we are. So now on the books in the Parliament, Mr. Speaker, you will see, for those persons who look at the 2020 estimates at page 705. You look at page 705. Two-thirds of the way down the page, it says overdrafts, Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Accountant General, 8% interest, $30.2 million. Interest payment, $4 million. Actually, that's not what I'm looking for. What I want is a loan now, sorry. The loan is below that. The loans, the Accountant General overdraft loan of 36.7 million with interest payments of 2.5 million. And then there's a second one, the Accountant General overdraft loan number 2 of 9.6 million and interest payments of $755,799. And then Accountant General loan, Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines again, 6.5%, $12 million. So there is one example of where it's in the document. Again, Mr. Speaker, the important thing to note is that there was no authorization from Parliament to borrow more than $50 million. There was no authorization in Parliament for taking on an ongoing loan of the Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, yet they did it, Mr. Speaker. The point I wish to make clear is this. That the government has been unlawful, lawless, in 3 fundamental ways with respect to this matter. One is by exceeding the limit of the resolution set by Parliament. We said $50 million is the most recent. So 2018 and 2017 would have been governed by that. By not paying down the overdraft, because the overdraft had not intended to add to government's borrowings in a prominent way. That is set out already in the estimates to tell you where all your borrowing coming from. And also by converting, the third illegality is by converting the overdraft loan without prior approval or authorization of Parliament to take such a loan. And it's not small money, Mr. Speaker. It's not $1 million and $2 million. Talking $40 million in one case in 2017. All these loans, as I said, are at the Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I could imagine, Mr. Speaker, only imagine, the anxiety within the management of the bank when they see the overdraft climbing and December 31st approaching and they know that it will not be repaid. So, it's like the government, Mr. Speaker, they're playing Pedro. It's like they're playing Pedro, Mr. Speaker. They start in the year, they start in the year in a hole. They bid too much. For those of you who know how to play Pedro. So this is where can't make you bid. So they caught you in the hole. So at the beginning of the year, that is where we are. So Speaker, I really shouldn't be chuckling about this because it tells us, it explains some of the things that we have been seeing and feeling and trying to explain it to the people. So this reckless, lawless, borrow and spend practice by government is costing the country dearly because the overdraft, as I said, is at an interest, that's the overdraft, and the loan is at an interest rate of between 6.5% and 8.5%. So it's no wonder that the debt service payments are going up so fast. So that now it is almost at 40% of current revenue. Are we a modern, democratic country? Or are we the plaything, Mr. Speaker, of those in government, especially the President and past Ministers of Finance? Can they do just what they feel like, what is convenient, what they can get away with? Or are they required and should they be held accountable to follow their laws? And Mr. Speaker, this is not an isolated matter. You know that last October we were in this Honorable House debating another instance or type, not even an instance, because there was numerous instances, type of abuse of our financial laws and practices when we discussed the special warrants that the Honorable Member for Central Kingstown raised in this House in a matter of a question and had to essentially push the government to bring the necessary supplementary estimates and obtain the necessary appropriation bills. At least the special warrants that come here and you bring them in and we debate them. You don't spend it, but at least you have to explain yourself. And Mr. Speaker, during the years 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018, the government, as you will recall, spent over $100 million through special warrants and failed to come to the Parliament in a timely manner to get approval for the money. Even all the way back to 2014, under a previous term of government, they had not brought those special warrants as required by law to the Parliament to inform of their use and to get the approval for the spending. What a sloppy, messy, illegal way to run the finances of government. Mr. Speaker, they would not even have brought those special warrants to the Parliament had the Honorable Sinclair Leacock not made such a fuss about it. From 2014, and you're bringing it in October of 2019. How you could explain that? Mea culpas, Mr. Speaker, they don't cut it. And that's what the minister tried to do when we had the debate. Oh, they're sorry. Won't happen again. But if you get used to that sort of practice, Mr. Speaker, it's very easy to do it again, because it's not a question of doing something wrong, it's a question of can you get away with doing it. Those guardrails, Mr. Speaker, need to become much more robust without the ability to get over or under them. Because this Minister of Finance, like his predecessor, will find a way to do it. It is generally agreed that the expected practice is that the supplementary estimates, Mr. Speaker, I'm talking about the special warrants, are required to be brought to the House within 6 months after the date that the special warrant was issued. There was some question as to how the law is written, but the practice was, the expectation is that you would do it within 6 months. Yet it took 5 years in the case of the special warrants in 2014 to be brought to this Parliament. That negligent practice, it violated the law, Mr. Speaker. It violated Section 28 of the Finance Administration Act and Section 70 of the Constitution of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. That was in one way in which it violated, because it didn't come to Parliament. But as I said back then, Mr. Speaker, nobody answered me last October when we were talking about it, when we were debating the supplementary estimates for those 5 years in question. 2014, 2015, 16, 17, and 18. Because, Mr. Speaker, just like you do with the overdraft, there's a limit set by Parliament as to how much money you can spend by way of special warrant, and that limit was $25 million. Not all the time. I don't know if you go back to 2014, if it was 25 million, it might have been less. I have to check. But at the time that we were talking about, when we were debating it, it was $25 million. I see here that they have a resolution to raise it to $35 million now. Yet, Mr. Speaker, even though Parliament by resolution said 25 million, in 3 of those 5 years that we debated last October in this Parliament, 3 of those 5 years, they exceeded that amount again. In 2014, the amount that they spent or used by way of special warrant was $28.5 million. The limit was 25. In 2017, it was 28.57. That can't be correct. I get the correct information. 2018, in any event, is $28.8 million. So we have, I think I have the actual document with it here. Yeah, Mr. Speaker, in 2014, the amount was 26.1.
Just give me 1 second, please.
Sorry.
This chair is exceedingly uncomfortable, so I'm going to use the one that I normally want to use. I threw that for 4 hours yesterday. It was really a pain, and I forgot to move it this morning.
Okay,
and
Mr. Speaker.
I'm trending for another 4 hours. So I said,
You're back.
let's not do this. All right, thank you so much. Honorable Leader of the Opposition, we can go. We can proceed.
Yes, as I was saying, Mr. Speaker, not only did they not bring it in a timely manner, but they also exceeded the limit. In 2014, it was 26.1 million, not 28, that was spent or used by way of special warrants. In 2017, it was 28.57 million, and in 2018, it was 28.8. So it was going up and up. So the government also violated the law here, and they showed scant regard for it because they came and debated it in the House last year, and not even a mea culpa this time. They just simply ignored it. They came to Parliament, Mr. Speaker, and they set the limit at 25 million. And then they turn around and they spend more than they were authorized to spend. Again, on what authority? It says you have a resolution of Parliament and you have to stick within it. That's lawlessness on the part of this government. In a third way, and this you may have some debate about it, but there's a third way in which, Mr. Speaker, they again did not follow the law with respect to the use of the special warrants. And we said this last year, but I think it's good that people, in the debate last year in October when we debated the supplementary estimates and appropriation bill. But it's good to put them all in context here together so people can see how these things relate. So also we saw in October of 2019 debate that the special warrants were abused by being used for things that could not seriously be said to be not foreseen as the law required. They were paying CWSA and VINLEC arrears and so on. I mean, you know it's an arrears, you know how much money they, if you want to pay it, budget it and pay it. Legal fees. But they do these things, Mr. Speaker, and you look through, they bring all 5 one time, so there's a lot of information there to go through, but you look through it, you see there are lots of other payments that are there that one can just look at it and say, this cannot be unforeseen. You know, payments of $1 million to the arrow route and so on, those payments have to be made. But make them in a proper and timely manner. Do them at the beginning, budget for them, put them in there so that people know they're going to get the money. Instead of simply coming in this ad hoc way, using special warrants to do it. Mr. Speaker, the Director of Audit actually disapproved of the way the special warrants have been used or abused. And in a report she wrote this, that the ease with which the funds can be obtained and spent without authorization of this Honorable House of Assembly should be reviewed to satisfy the purpose of the Constitution, Section 70.
Which of the reports are you reading from? Which year?
I'm not sure. I don't have the year here. The report of the Accountant General, which he spoke about the 2013. Yeah, 2013. Yeah. So, Mr. Speaker, as we know that the Director of Audit, because, I mean, the reports of the Director of Audit are 7 years out of date, you know that. They're behind because that's one of the problems that we have complained about. So, Mr. Speaker, the Director of Audit lacks the resources, and one would even say perhaps although it's an independent, constitutionally independent office, but you have to have the muscle as well to get the government to act properly and to comply with the law. So, Mr. Speaker, here we have, with respect to the overdraft facility, the use of the special warrants, where the government has been doing things its own way, but not in accordance with the law. As you know, I had raised this issue, and my predecessor, the leader of the opposition, had raised the issue about accountability generally, and pointed out how the Minister of Finance was not complying with the accountability regulations in the Constitution, the Finance Administration Act, and in the Audit Act. And the report of the Director of Audit have not been laid in this House up to date for a very long time. I think we're up to 2013 now, and the last report that was laid was for the year 2013, and we are now in 2020. So it is very difficult, Mr. Speaker, to understand how we can justify this illegal, lawless, messy, sloppy, whichever term you want to use, manner of using the public finances and failing to account for them by the Minister of Finance. The Minister is responsible, Mr. Speaker, and he should take that responsibility seriously. And we don't write the law as we go along on a daily basis. If it says this is what you do, this is what you're supposed to do. And if you can't do it, then you have to come to the Parliament and explain yourself. Don't hope that nobody will catch on and you can continue to do what you're doing. So to sum up on this matter, Mr. Speaker, the government has been behaving unlawfully in the way it manages the finances of the country. So, in sum, it is a lawless government, Mr. Speaker. It does not follow the financial accountability laws in the Constitution, the Finance Administration Act, and the Audit Act, and we have spoken about this in public. It has abused the use of the special warrants, that's Section 28 of the Finance Administration Act and Section 70 of the Constitution, by not bringing them to Parliament when required to do so, by not limiting the use to generally unforeseen circumstances, and by not limiting the amount to the limit set by the resolution of this House. By recklessly abusing the overdraft facility provided by the resolution of Parliament, and by exceeding again the limit not paying off, by not paying it off by the end of the year. So there are three ways in which, Mr. Speaker, I've said earlier, that the overdraft facility has been abused. And then, of course, by converting a large part of it into a loan without Parliament's approval. If this is not lawlessness on the part of the government, I don't know what is, Mr. Speaker. Because the financial management of this country, we trust the minister. Not everybody in the member of the public understands the requirements and knows the ins and outs of how you're supposed to keep within the guardrails that are set up. The financial architecture that we have been following for years and are supposed to apply. So the minister has a duty, an obligation to ensure that the existing guardrails are used to limit his activity. But they are clearly, Mr. Speaker, not a deterrent for this present administration. So maybe it is time for us to go the way of Grenada and start drafting legislation to more specifically govern the affairs of the government, to keep them in check. Grenada has something called the Fiscal Responsibility Act and 2 other attendant pieces of legislation that are intended to keep the government fiscally responsible. I think the minister has something in the back of the budget document called the Fiscal Responsibility Framework. I don't know what the legal authority of this document is, but certainly if they're not bothering with the law, I don't think they can bother the framework, get it themselves draft and put here. So it's required. It's a requirement that we put those things into law, Mr. Speaker, and they will benefit the people of our country in the short term and in the long term. Mr. Speaker, I wish to move on to discuss some more specific matters that are dealt with in the minister's report, budget document. But you know, the sad thing, or the painful thing that we see with the way the government has been operating is that even with all this reckless spending, with this ballooning of debt of the country, you would have thought that all of that would have resulted in something that the government had to show for it and could boast about. That is to say, more jobs, better living standards. Instead, the people are finding it harder to make ends meet. Sure, you have big facilities, you have projects and so on, but those things are only important if they improve lives. If they improve the standard of living, they provide opportunities for our people. That's why we do them. They're not paintings to be hung on a wall that you admire for their beauty. They are supposed to function to make life better for our people. So when you tell me, well, you did this with the money, you did that with the money, I have to come back and say, well, how did that help the people of this country? Did it generate higher growth rates in the country to create more jobs? Did it allow more businesses to flourish? Or is it just something that adds to the debt and we feel that we can say, well, we have one like that too? So, Mr. Speaker, what we have is that all of this is going on in the financial side. The government spending its money, it's doing its thing. Meanwhile, the public infrastructure throughout the country is falling apart because they have no money to fix them. Look at our roads, Mr. Speaker, the clinics, our jetties, public buildings. You see neglect and decay. That is what we see. And sometimes it's depressing, Mr. Speaker. There was a time when you stepped off the ferry in Beckway and they had a building, a yellow building right in front. It's the revenue building that the government owns. The revenue building. It was built, I think, 1998 or 99, somewhere around then. So shortly before the government came into office. Never had a coat of paint in that whole time. You step off the ferry and you look at this and you think, how depressing. The marquee building for the government in the middle of the town, looking like that. I think somebody donated the paint last year to paint it. Imagine that. If they hadn't done so, the building would still look as disgusting as it had become. So, Mr. Speaker, we talk about this on the radio, in our public meetings, we write about it in articles, we come in Parliament from time to time, we ask questions about, especially of the Minister of Transport and Works, about how we're going to get these things fixed up. And sometimes, Mr. Speaker, I think he must just get fed up, because I see him throw up his hand and say, well, listen, I don't have the money, okay? Even with all of that. Say, I don't have the money. I want to do it. You're right. The road bad. I should fix it, but I don't have the money. In Canouan, Mr. Speaker, the main jetty in Canouan at Grand Bay had been deteriorating over years, 15 years. And it was difficult, Mr. Speaker. It's unsafe. It's messy when it rains. It's dusty when it's dry. They've been using what was supposed to be a temporary jetty. That was constructed in 2013 or so? Yeah. And the idea was that it would be temporary until the permanent one was built or repaired. Many users find it difficult to use this jetty, Mr. Speaker. The dinghies, when they come up next to it, I think you saw pictures in the newspaper not so long ago of people trying to climb up out of the boat. Where is it? Yeah, Mr. Speaker, on the back page of the news newspaper, January 24th, you see visitors trying to get out of their dinghy on one of the wharfs. There, they couldn't. Well, I guess they eventually did. But the problem is, Mr. Speaker, no matter how much the member for Southern Grenadines harangued the government about this, they've done nothing. The member for Southern Grenadines asked questions in Parliament since going back 2004, when the Honorable Sir Vincent Beach, of blessed memory, replied that $251,000 had been allocated in the estimates to start work on the wharf. Again, in February of 2005, similar question to Beach, he said the $251,000 had been given in that amount to start the work the previous year. That was his answer to the question. In October of 2006, the Honorable Member for Southern Grenadines asked a question of Minister Bergen, who was there at the time. Jeez, I mean, we don't remember sometimes these people in the House. And this thing continues to be a live matter for this Honorable House. And the minister at the time said that he was the Minister of Transport and Works, that they were unaware of any commitment made by the government to fix the jetty. Questions were then asked of the Prime Minister in 2009, February. He said $193,000 had been allocated. In October 2009, when they said $2.9 million had been allocated. And in May, again 2012, that preliminary designs were underway, and the cost was now $3.5 million. I mean, this thing has been going on and on and on. And it is not just that you can have a bypass if your road bad, you can say, I ain't driving there, I can go somewhere else. This is the access point to Canouan for business, for travelers, for people who live in Canouan. And they have to go through this. It's terrible, Mr. Speaker. So you have that as a major infrastructure in the Southern Grenadines that is not being attended to. In my case, Mr. Speaker, Northern Grenadines, I talk about the airport, the Jeff Mitchell Airport, ad nauseum in this Honorable House. And the place now is just looking so terrible. The interior, the ceiling is falling down. The eaves around the side have big chunks that are missing since 2004. The door in the back door can't work no more. The apron, the surface is disintegrated, so now you have pebbles there. I mean, that must be very risky for the planes when their propellers are turning, that they could kick up dust or gravel that goes into their engines. And the building, Mr. Speaker, that is essential to the tourism in Bequia is being left to fall into a state of disrepair. First, the lights were removed, the approach lights were removed a few years ago. The fire truck works on its own schedule, not when it's absolutely needed. The fire station, Mr. Speaker, is a dump. It's a dump. And I don't know how we can expect professional people to live in that place. It is horrible. And the Prime Minister says now that in the budget, it's an election year after all, they have $1.5 million that's been allocated to fix airports in the Grenadines. My humble opinion is, Mr. Speaker, I don't think the 1.5 will even fix Beckwith Airport because the deterioration is so great now. The Honorable Vincent Beach, when he was the minister responsible for airports, I think at one time he threw up his hands in the house and he said, basically, the dance can't pay for the lights. So essentially, it seemed like they weren't going to fix it. And that remained the status quo until now. Mr. Speaker, I ask my colleagues to let me know of some of the areas in their constituencies of dilapidation so we could really try and shake. If we can't move them in an election year, then you have to move them at the polls. This is something, Mr. Speaker, that we have talked about, as I said, over and over again. I've seen a few of them, some of them, not all of them, but have been reported to me, and I have photographs of some of them. Recently, we went down to see the Camden Park Clinic. It's an eyesore, Mr. Speaker. You've seen it. The grass is uncut, it's rusty, leaking, the ceiling is falling down just like the Jeff Mitchell Airport. And this is a functioning health facility. I heard the minister talking yesterday about clinics building here, smart hospital building there, about the facility up at Georgetown. All well and good. But you can't walk and chew gum at the same time? You want to tell me because you fix one, you have to let the other one go down to the state where it's basically not functioning effectively anymore? Come on. The Paget Farm Clinic in Bequia, the supporting walls, they've completely crumbled. The clinic inside, horrible state of disrepair. The hard court at the playing field in Paget Farm near to the airport, that was built, Mr. Speaker, a wonderful facility for the young people of that village. There were lights on it, fenced. If you go and see it now, the fence has completely broken down. They had hoops at both ends. Neither end has a hoop anymore. In fact, one of them, the metal thing that holds the hoop is broken. The building, or the little shed that holds the electrical switches and so on, but there's no door in it. It doesn't function anymore because the lights are not gone. The surface of the thing has gone now. It's broken up. You can't even play there safely anymore. The wire is buried in the grass on the ground. And this is a government that talks about how much they love young people. Why would you allow a facility like that very useful, well used by the community, to go to the state where now it cannot function at all. And to rebuild it, it's going to cost a lot of money. And the young people could have been using that in the evenings to go and play a little basketball, which is a very big and popular sport in Bequia. If they want to play, they had to come up to the hard court in the harbor. It's not right, Mr. Speaker. So this is why I say that we have arrived, even with all the financial malfeasance, even with all the ballooning of the debt, even with all the spend and spend, we still come to a state of decay, a state of dereliction in this country. Mr. Speaker, in North Windward, there's a road by Wayne Nanton's residence that leads to the clinic and the police station. That road, I know that one, is in a deplorable condition. Yes. And I know the one too next to where Laurent Baptiste used to have his office for the NDP. No, I went to a meeting there. I went to a public meeting there before it was damaged. I know that one. Yes, I'm glad you find it humorous. So the road where that office is, Mr. Speaker, that was damaged by the heavy rains in 2016. And it's still, Mr. Speaker, it's not repaired. Why you don't fix that? I mean, that's really terrible. That one is terrible. That one is terrible. The road in O'Brien's Valley next to Miss Connell, that one I don't know. But I'm reliably informed, Mr. Speaker, and I've seen photos. It's in terrible condition. In South Central Windward, in Chapman's, I went to a meeting the other day at New Delphi. And I tell you, Mr. Speaker, the road to getting in there was something else.
What the express?
Eh?
Hard work.
Go up the now. All right.
You fix it before you fix yours?
So in Chapman's, the road below Miss Butte residence has been in a deplorable condition for many years, Mr. Speaker. And I say the road leading to New Delphi from Garnet Shop to Grace Durant's residence, Mr. Speaker. Terrible, terrible condition. That's what I'm talking about. In East St. George, I've seen pictures. In fact, I've been there. The road at Kanash. Everybody here must know that. Remember for the minister himself must know that. That's in terrible condition. Upper Glen Road, from Lowe's Mini Mart, all the way back to Rosewood Apartments. Also from the Calico Police Station to the clinic, to the Lois Punnett home, which you talked so much about yesterday, and to the Fair Hall Primary School, terrible condition. You should know those. Yeah, no shame, you know. Honestly. Mr. Speaker, in South Leeward, the road at Coconut Range, I went to that one, Camden Park, above the Technical Institute, between Keita Delplesh's resident and Paddy Neptune's, collapsed. It collapsed in 2017, hasn't been repaired. Pothole craters at 20 Hill in Pedestal. I think we have that in the picture. Yeah. No. It's all right. Mr. Speaker, here, we have in the newspaper, yes. There's this one. So you see it there. So, Mr. Speaker, in the Northern Grenadines, I spoke of some of the dilapidation there. I think we must be the capital of decay in terms of some of the facilities there. They're really, Mr. Speaker, the main road from Friendship all the way down to Paget Farm is really an obstacle course. It's not a road. It's terrible. I know that one firsthand. I ain't been to the moon, but I know it has craters on it. Yes. So, Mr. Speaker, The road at Hamilton, near to Elise Macri's house there, there's a bridge there that's in terrible condition. Terrible condition. In fact, I think something ought to be done to prevent people from driving under it. They put a piece of metal sheet over it, but I think that's unsafe. And if it's not fixed, something ought to be done to prevent people from using it. Because it will have an accident there, God forbid. South Windward, Reeves Level Road from Carlos Pumpy Shop to Freedom Hall Church. In Western George, Mary Hall George, you got about that one talk about in this honorable house. Mary Hall, yes. The road also, Mr. Speaker, from the Richards, from Lower Vigie to Villa Fountain. And in North Leeward, the Barracks Bypass Road from the Methodist Preschool to the damaged bridge at Sharps Park. I know that one. And part of the main road